Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Irish Illustrated ISO. I'm Tim Priester from Irish Illustrated. And a couple weeks ago, Tim O'Malley did a similar ISO talking about previewing spring. It came on the heels of us meeting with Rob Hunt, Notre Dame's head athletic trainer of football, and he went over all the injuries. There are 29 players listed in four different categories, and those were out for the spring, modified for the spring, cleared to practice for the spring, and then a group that we call modified activity. He didn't give it a name, but that's our name for it. So he mentioned 29 guys. We're going into spring, and came up with the idea of let's talk about with each position group, who is the most interesting or intriguing player slash story of the spring. So the guys that are out with injuries, those guys aren't eligible to be part of this analysis, and as well as those that are going to be at least modified and won't practice the whole spring. So long introduction to start in with quarterback and who's the most interesting. Well, we know that Steve Angeli has the most experience. Notre Dame might not have gotten to the national title game if it wasn't for his performance against Penn State at the end of the second half. But most interesting, most intriguing, I think most people would point to CJ Carr, who has been around. Here's what happens. These guys not only come in early, early entries in the spring, but some of them now are starting to practice with a team during bowl season. And that was CJ Carr. We all understand that CJ Carr was a freshman last year, but there's some other guys that do this. So it's kind of a double take as to like, are they a sophomore already, or have they been around so long that they're still in their freshman year? And so that's the case with CJ Carr. He's the most intriguing. There's no doubt about it. He suffered the elbow injury during September, was not able to throw through the rest of the season. By the time they got to January, he was throwing pretty much full tilt through the pregame warmups. So when Rob Hunt announced those that were cleared, he mentioned CJ Carr last, and so nothing holding him back this spring. Very interested, obviously, in seeing how he looks throwing the football. He was very, very good when we saw him last spring, especially during the Jersey scrimmage day, the week before the Blue Gold game, when he was outstanding. It was only open to the media up in the press box, and obviously he was very impressive. Steve Angeli could win the job. Steve Angeli is probably the most prepared to go on the road to open the season against Miami. Will Notre Dame take that into consideration? Will they look at maybe easing Carr into the season a little bit more, considering the first two games are at Miami and Texas A&M? We don't know, but spring practice starts on Wednesday, March 19th. And so we're looking forward to seeing how that competition unfolds between Steve Angeli and CJ Carr. Kenny Minchey obviously will be out there. Blake Hebert will be out there as well, but we expect it to be a two-man battle. And CJ Carr, now front and center with an opportunity to win the starting job, is, from my perspective, the most interesting and most intriguing of the guys at his position. At running back, Jeremiah Love will be on that. What was the term that I used? That modified. Let me check it again. That modified activity. So, and these are guys that the guys in that category are the ones that they played prominent roles last year, played extensively, generally speaking, in January, and so they're going to modify their activity and based upon on the workload. Modified workload is actually the expression that I've used, because they can afford to. Jeremiah Love does not need a whole bunch of reps. There's like 8 or 9 guys: Josh Burtham, Bryce Young, some people that may have been banged up a little bit or just went through the physical toll of the season. Jeremiah Love's on that list. We'll see a lot of Jadarian Price, Aeneas Williams, Kedron Young. We're looking forward to seeing him. Nolan James, the freshman, the early entry freshman, will be out there as well. But the guy that I picked is the most interesting, intriguing. And again, I like a lot of times I know the people, they want to hear about the new guy, but I tend to look at from a coach's perspective, who's the one that has experience. And in 2023, Jabron Payne actually won the short yardage job to open the season ahead of Audric Estime. Now, Estime went on to rush for 1,341 yards and 18 touchdowns, and he eventually took over that short yardage role. But Jabron Payne was the guy that had that job, and he Irish fans will remember that he suffered a torn ACL in the blue gold game last spring, and so he was out for the season. So Jabron Payne is back. Deland McCullough is not. Deland McCullough liked Jabron Payne an awful lot in that short yardage situation. How will Jaywan Sider view that? Who knows? We're going to start finding out on Wednesday, March 19th. But Jabron Payne is a guy that plays with good pad level. They liked him. At least Deland McCullough liked him in that short yardage situation. And now he's back and fully cleared. Will Sider view him the same way that McCullough did? If not, maybe this is the last go round for Jabron Payne, who could go elsewhere and get a whole lot more snaps than he will with Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, definitely ahead of him, and Aeneas Williams establishing himself last season. As we move to the wide receiver position, we're not going to see really the four top receivers as they go into the fall. Malachi Fields isn't here yet. Will Pauling is here, but has the metatarsal injury in his foot that he's dealing with. He will not practice this spring. And the guys on the modified activity for the spring, Jaden Greathouse, Jordan Faison are on that list as well. So the top four receivers are out. We're going to see a whole bunch of young guys led by KK Smith, who's a junior now, and then redshirt freshman Micah Gilbert, Logan Saldate, Cam Williams, and then there are three true freshmen that are here already, the early entries, and that, of course, is Jerome Bettis Jr. and Elijah Burris and Tavius Richardson. So who's the most intriguing? For me, it's kind of a make or break spring for KK Smith. He's now a junior, redshirt sophomore. He'd worked his way into pushing for playing time last year when Notre Dame got a little banged up there, Jordan Faison especially. So, what do we expect out of KK Smith this spring? Well, he's a guy that really is an X, which is where Jordan Faison plays, and Faison is involved with lacrosse, so we're not going to see a whole lot of him. So it's a great opportunity for KK Smith, who definitely impressed the coaching staff. His name came up multiple times off the lips of Marcus Freeman when he was pressing for playing time. He did get a little bit of action and then fell back once Jordan Faison came back and was full goal and was playing really his best football of the year in the second half of the season, and especially in the playoffs as well. So KK Smith, a very capable guy, a guy that is most likely to play the X position, the field position, receiver opposite the W, the boundary receiver. And, now if Micah Gilbert ends up being the most intriguing player at wide receiver this year, I wouldn't be surprised. I mentioned him on Irish Illustrated in this story because I just felt like he's a guy that I know the Notre Dame likes him a lot. They like Logan Saldate a lot. And I think those are two guys that will flash at times this year. Everybody asks about Cam Williams. Cam Williams was behind the learning curve last year. A kid that's a good fit at Notre Dame. I think he's very coachable. We'll see what he does this year. But for right now, any one of those guys, Saldate, Williams, or Gilbert, could be somebody that becomes the most intriguing player. But we're going to go with KK Smith. At tight end, wow, not a lot of bodies there right now. And this is not your typical tight end position for Notre Dame. Mitchell Evans out the door. We know Eli Raridan's going to be the lead man at tight end. Probably the leading pass catcher, Cooper Flanagan, who they like a lot and has played a lot up to this point. He suffered the Achilles injury and he's out. Ty Washington would have been my choice, but we only picked the guys that are already here for spring practice. So Ty Washington will be here in the summer. I would have considered him the most intriguing in the entire group because they need another body there. He's an accomplished blocker. He's still learning as a pass receiver, and really Eli Raridan will be that main guy. Other guys, Jack Larson, a redshirt freshman, a bit undersized. He could flash. James Flanagan, the highly touted freshman, won't be here until the summer. The guy I picked, and again, that's not a sexy pick, as some would say, generally always looking ahead to that young guy, but Kevin Bauman is back for a 6th year. He's had 2 ACLs. He's had a broken leg. He really was not involved a whole lot in last year's activity. But I think that he's a guy now that he's 2 years removed from that second ACL injury and surgery. Maybe he's a guy that can give you quite a bit more. We've seen so many times with knee injuries, torn ACLs, and Achilles injuries. It generally takes 2 years to be at your best. It happened with Jadarian Price. He was back, but it just those are two injuries that seem to take a lot longer to get back to 100%. So I'm interested to see what Kevin Bauman can do. Not going to be a major pass catching threat, but definitely has great blocking potential if he's back to 100%. And on the offensive line, we have a whole bunch of people out. Styles Prescott is back from right shoulder surgery. The guy's definitely out for the spring, or Ashton Craig and Chris Terek. Modified activity will be Billy Schrouth and Anthony Knapp. Monitored workload is Emil Wagner. So there's a great opportunity for a lot of the young guys, and I want to focus on Gerby Lambert. Everybody's excited about Gerby Lambert around Notre Dame. Notre Dame fans are excited about him. Prototypical 6'7", 323. I'd say prototypical tackle. I don't know if he's necessarily a prototypical left tackle, but there's really no reason to move Emil Wagner, who really established himself at right tackle. So very interested to see Gerby Lambert. He's a mammoth young man. When you stand next to him, on the football field or near him, you can see just why he was considered a 4 to 5 star prospect. Gerby Lambert will get because of all the injuries. I mean, Anthony Knapp is a guy that probably has to move inside because we don't know where Ashton Craig will be at center in terms of his recovery from injury. Eventually, Knapp will see some time this spring, but he did have a procedure done on his right ankle after the Orange Bowl against Penn State. And so Gerby Lambert is going to get a full shot at that left tackle spot. I wouldn't be surprised at all, actually, if he nailed down that spot. Jumping over to defense, along the defensive line at defensive end, I broke it down with the stories into two different categories. At defensive end, again, out for the spring, Boubacar Traore, Jordan Botelho. Monitored workload, Josh Burnham, Bryce Young. The most intriguing guy for me by far, and I found a quote that I got from Al Washington prior to the Sugar Bowl in New Orleans. Logan Thomas is a guy that they really, really like. He is let me just give you a couple of things that Al Washington said about him. He said, first of all, he's a genuine person. What I mean by that is there's no smoke to him. He's a straight shooter. What you see is what you get. He's a team first player, works his tail off, very intelligent on the field, great under pressure, and I think he's talented. Obviously, he's special in that way. This is a guy, look, when Traore and Botelho come back and Burnham's fully healthy and everybody's fully healthy again, there isn't a lot of room for a fifth defensive end. But if anybody's going to do it, it's Logan Thomas. Logan Thomas shot up to 224. He came in at 208 or 205. Again, early entry freshman. And that's why you start to wonder, is he a freshman or is he a sophomore? Or a junior or a sophomore? And he is actually a sophomore now. When he played last year, he was good. He had a hamstring issue, missed one game. He was excellent on special teams. And Al Washington is really, really high on Logan Thomas. He was listed at 224. I'm very curious to see where he will be listed when spring actually starts. I would be surprised if he's not in his 230s because he's a kid that's really dedicated to the cause. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting to see what Logan Thomas can do. And I don't think a whole lot of fans are alerted to him because of the way that Traore stepped forward last year and Botelho coming back for that extra year. But I think Logan Thomas has a very, very bright future ahead for him at defensive end. At defensive tackle, Jason Onye is back. You could easily pick Jason Onye as the most interesting player. I want to have an opportunity to visit with him. I'm sure we will get an opportunity to do that and to talk about just what he went through this past fall. He left the team due to personal reasons. He could be a really key guy for Notre Dame and clearly is very intriguing. But the guy that I'm going with is Jared Dawson, because Jared Dawson, coming from Louisville, is a plug and play player for Notre Dame on the middle of that defensive line. Howard Cross Riley Mills are gone, of course. They need bodies there. We know Gabe Rubio is a starter. Gabe Rubio has to stay healthy for Notre Dame. And frankly, when he came back from his preseason injury, I thought he was really good. I thought there were moments where we really saw an outstanding prospect, a 6'5" defensive tackle with quickness and agility. Gabe Rubio is going to be really good and really key. But Jared Dawson is that unknown factor, and that's what makes him really intriguing for us. 19 tackles for loss, 9 sacks in his last couple of years at Louisville. I see him as a guy that can, he's not really as big as most nose tackles or as the size that you want for a nose tackle, but I think he's going to be playing there quite a bit. He's a two-way guy for me. He's a two-gap guy for me. I think that he has that kind of quickness. His size is more 3 technique, but they're going to plug him in at nose tackle, and I think that he has a chance to be a real difference maker. Let's put it this way. If Notre Dame is going to make the playoffs and make some inroads in the playoffs, Jared Dawson's going to have to be very good for Notre Dame. When we go to the linebacker position, a couple, Anthony Saka and Koakia are not here yet. Kahanu Kia, the oldest of the Kia brothers, is coming off a second ACL on his left knee, so he will be out this spring. Monitor workload will be Drake Bowen and Jalen Sneed. I did pick Jalen Sneed as the most interesting story because there was a time last year, it was a Louisville game when he exited the field early, that we really weren't certain what the future held for Jalen Sneed. Him and Marcus Freeman gave an excuse as to why he left the field early. We don't believe that excuse to have been true. He was frustrated. He had 12 snaps against Louisville, and he was frustrated even in victory for Notre Dame. But what an interesting character, because he could have gone in the tank and could have gone in the other direction, but instead he doubled down and he played outstanding football the rest of the season. He had so many fewer snaps than Drake Bowen and Kingston Viliamu-Asa, who in his own right is very intriguing because he's got a chance to be great. But Jalen Sneed was a guy that led the defense in third down stops, and he led it by a wide margin. And so that's a guy that came up clutch when they needed him on the money down. So we're taking a good look at Jalen Sneed this year. At the end of spring, if he doesn't like where his standing is on the depth chart, he might be a guy that looks to go elsewhere. I don't like to speculate about that stuff too much because that's unfair to the kid, but we knew his frustration during the season, and so we'll monitor him. But a guy that is a big player for Notre Dame's defense, and we'll see where that heads in 2025. At cornerback, it's really unfortunate. Said this in the Irish Illustrated Insider podcast the other day. It's really unfortunate that freshman Dallas Golden and Mark Zachary IV are not here yet. They could place their names or they could compete for a spot on the depth chart right away. That's going to have to wait until they arrive at summer. Chance Tucker is out. Not sure that Chance Tucker was really in the running as it is. And then monitored workload for Leonard Moore and Christian Gray, the guys that we know are definite starters for Notre Dame at cornerback heading into the season. Carson Hobbs. Carson Hobbs is my pick for the most interesting story because he was a guy, in August practice last year, both him and Leonard Moore stood out. Now, they are similar in length and weight and size. When you watch those two together, you realize, man, is Leonard Moore long? And I know that people sometimes look at 6'1". All 6'1" players are made alike. That's not true. Length of arms, length of torso, those kind of things differentiate. And that's what we saw with Leonard Moore. But you saw a little bit of that with Carson Hobbs too. Now, Leonard Moore differentiated himself from Hobbs, and just about every freshman quarter in the country, he was that good. But Carson Hobbs has a chance to earn a spot as a number 2 cornerback before those freshmen come into play. Cree Thomas is a freshman that will be here. That's an early entry. And I wouldn't rule him out either because remember, he's from the same high school as Benjamin Morrison. So very well taught. We know that. But Carson Hobbs is a guy that has an excellent opportunity to put his name on the depth chart, the 2 deep. He played in 9 games last year. He did not play in the playoffs. Most of his work in those 9 games was on special teams, but keep an eye on him. And it's, you hate to say this about a guy that's just going into his second year, but it's an important spring for him because one, Cree Thomas is there, and two, as I mentioned, Golden and Zachary are coming in. So important spring for Carson Hobbs. When we jump over to the safety position, Don Schuler, I don't know if he's going to be an All-American like Xavier Watts, but if a year from now we were sitting here saying All-American to Don Schuler, I don't think any of us would be surprised. He hit the ground running last year, beginning with the Texas A&M game, played great football. Jalen Stroman, the transfer, the physical transfer from Virginia Tech, is out for the spring. He's recovering from, he came in, he had a broken clavicle at Virginia Tech, and it didn't heal properly, and so Notre Dame had to go in and do that procedure. So he won't be on the field. I think the two most interesting, intriguing players at safety this spring are Kennedy Urlacher, and if he wins the job, I wouldn't be surprised. And I say win the job before Jalen Stroman will be in play this summer. But the guy I chose was Luke Telich, and I think he's really interesting. A walk-on from Cody, Wyoming, who bet on himself. He could have taken a scholarship to a lot of different places. Instead, he was a preferred walk-on at Notre Dame. He played special teams in 2023, earned a scholarship going into 2024. He had that 79-yard interception return in mop-up duty against Florida State, and it was really, really good on Notre Dame's coverage teams, and that carried over from the regular season into the playoffs. He was really outstanding on special teams. What you love about Luke Telich is the great length, a legitimate 6'4". All things being equal, you would love to have a 6'4" safety as your starter as opposed to a 5'11" safety like Kennedy Urlacher. But you know what? I think those four guys, there's a chance that a Don Schuler, who will be difficult to take off the field, there's no doubt about that, but there's a chance that a Don Schuler, Jalen Stroman, Luke Telich, and Kennedy Urlacher will form some type of rotation back there at safety, depending upon who totally steps forward, or if all four of them look like they're ready to play. I should say, if Telich and Urlacher are ready to play, they will form a rotation. But last year, Telich could not get into the rotation, and his opportunity is now. We'll wrap up with the specialist, really just looking at kicker and punter. And I'm not going to choose James Randall because he is back. And while we all complained about the technique and what it all looked like and what was, the bouncing balls and why isn't he hitting the ball, at a 45, 47-yard clip as a former rugby player, or I should say Australian football rules player. But at the end of the day, he did a pretty good job. He didn't kick any in the end zone. He had no touchbacks. He had none blocked. There was very little return yardage against him. So it's unorthodox, but it works. My choice is Noah Burnett, the transfer from North Carolina, who he comes into Notre Dame. He made almost 82% of his field goals in his last 2 years, but that stat's a little deceiving because he was 19 of 20 in the 2023 season. So he struggled a little bit last year, and unfortunately for him, he missed the most crucial kick of the year for North Carolina, and that was in double overtime against NC State, their greatest rival. So that kind of stood out. But I know that Marty Biagi, he's got a great background as a kicker in college, so that's an advantage. Very few special teams coaches have that advantage of having been kickers or punters, and Biagi was both. So he has a chance to work with Burnett. Mitch Jeter would have had a great year last year had it not been for the injury. He came on strong when he needed to the most in the playoffs. But Noah Burnett is under pressure here. Not a real big guy, 5'9", 175. He was 15 of 21 on field goals last year. Does not have great distance. Only attempted one 50-yarder in the last 2 years, and he missed that. So, I wouldn't go into this as a Notre Dame fan expecting him to have great distance, but he has converted a high percentage in the last 2 years, bobbled a little bit there last season, but Marty Biagi can work with him. So those are some of the guys that we're looking at. Look, we write stories and you pick a topic and you say, hey, this is the guy most intriguing, most interesting. Obviously, there are dozens of intriguing and interesting stories to be told on the Irish practice field this spring. So that's it for this edition of Irish Illustrated ISO.